You know, most people think I'm crazy, and maybe I am. But at 80 years old, I packed up my house in Ohio, sold most of what I owned, and got on a plane to Ecuador. That was 2 years ago, and I've never been happier in my life. My name is Warren Hensley. I spent 58 years as a structural engineer. Good career, decent money, raised 2 kids, lost a wife I loved more than I can put into words. For decades, I did everything right. I followed the script: work hard, retire at 65, take a few cruises, play golf on weekends, sit in a recliner, and wait for the end. And I was dying. Not physically, not yet, anyway, but spiritually. Everything felt small, beige, like watching life on television instead of living it. I retired in 1999. My wife, Catherine, was still alive then. We had plans, real plans. We were going to travel, see Europe, learn something new. But Catherine got sick in 2003, cancer. We spent the next 6 years fighting it, and in 2009, I lost her. And after that, I don't know. I just kept moving forward, because that's what you do. You wake up, you eat breakfast, you fill the hours. My daughter kept calling, making sure I was okay. My son sent emails about his kids' baseball games. I was present, but I wasn't there, if that makes sense. I lived in the same house in Columbus for 42 years. It's a nice house, 4 bedrooms, a 2-car garage, a yard I spent weekends maintaining, and it started feeling like a mausoleum. Every room had a memory of Catherine. The kitchen where we made Sunday pancakes, the living room where we watched the Buckeyes, the bedroom where I'd spend half the night awake, listening to the silence. Around 2018, I started traveling a bit more seriously. Nothing crazy, just a week here, a week there, cruises to the Caribbean, bus tours through the American Southwest, that kind of thing. And I met people, other retirees mostly, and I noticed something. The happiest ones weren't the ones with the most money. They were the ones doing something different, the ones who'd taken a risk. I had a friend, Bill Zimmerman. We'd worked together for 30 years, and in 2019, his son convinced him to move to Nicaragua. Just for a year, Bill said, just to see. He rented a little house in Granada and sent me pictures. This man was in his 70s, and suddenly he was learning Spanish, cooking local food, taking dance classes. His emails were alive, actually alive. That's when something shifted in my head. I started researching. I got on YouTube and watched these videos of American retirees in Central and South America. Most of it looked like fantasy, retirement porn. But then I stumbled on this channel about people moving to Ecuador, and Ecuador just kept showing up in my search results, in my news feed, in conversations. I'm not a believer in signs exactly, but I started paying attention. The practical stuff was interesting. Ecuador uses the US dollar as its currency. That's a huge deal when you're an American on Social Security. Your money just goes further. A nice apartment in Cuenca, which is this beautiful colonial city in the Southern Highlands, could rent for $800 to $1,200 a month. That's cheaper than a lot of assisted living facilities in Ohio. Healthcare is good and incredibly cheap. A doctor's visit costs maybe $30 without insurance. I'm 82 now, and I've had some health stuff. Nothing serious, thank God, but every time I've needed to see someone, it's been efficient, professional, and cost a fraction of what it would back home. But it wasn't really about the money, even though that was part of it. It was about the possibility. In 2023, I took a trip. Just me, alone. I flew into Quito and spent 3 weeks visiting different towns. I went to Vilcabamba first, this little village in the south that's famous for having a lot of very old people. I met a 94-year-old American woman there who was still teaching English to local kids. Then I went to Otavalo, in the north, this indigenous market town that's absolutely buzzing with energy and culture. I visited Salinas, on the coast, which is where a lot of gringos have settled. But I kept coming back to Cuenca. Cuenca is about 450,000 people, not tiny, but not huge either. It sits in a valley at about 8,400 feet, so the weather is eternal spring. 70 degrees, maybe 65 in the morning. Never too hot. The city itself is drop-dead beautiful. The historic center, El Centro, is all Spanish colonial architecture. These narrow cobblestone streets, churches with gold leaf on the interior, plazas with fountains and old men playing chess. The University of Cuenca is there, so there's this intellectual energy, young people, culture, but it also feels real, not touristy, not manufactured. I spent a week just walking around. I'd have coffee at a little place on Calle Larga that's one of the main streets, stretching alongside the Tomebamba River, and I'd just sit there with a book or a notebook. I'd eat lunch at different restaurants, trying ceviche and locro de papas, and these little empanadas filled with cheese and potatoes. I'd wander into the markets, watch people buy flowers and vegetables and fresh fish. I'd sit in the cathedral on a random Tuesday afternoon, and it would be empty except for a few people praying, and the light would come through the stained glass, and I'd feel something I hadn't felt in years. By the end of that week, I knew. I actually knew. I flew back to Ohio and didn't tell anyone for a month. That's how serious I was taking it. I needed to sit with it, make sure it wasn't just romantic travel fantasy. I spent a month going through the house, deciding what mattered. Most of it didn't. I mean, really didn't. I gave my dining room furniture to my daughter. She actually wanted it. I donated most of Catherine's clothes, which was hard, but they were just sitting in a closet, and that felt wrong. I sold the house to a young family with 2 kids. They were excited about it, and that made it easier. They wanted the same kitchen table where Catherine and I had had breakfast every morning for 41 years. They were going to make their own memories there. By the beginning of 2024, I'd simplified my life down to 2 suitcases, a laptop, some important documents, and the stuff I genuinely loved. I gave my kids a call. I flew to Columbus for a weekend and had dinner with both of them and explained what I was doing. My son thought I was having a breakdown. My daughter was quieter. She asked if it was about Mom, if I was still grieving and maybe making a decision I'd regret. And I told her the truth. I was done grieving in the past. I wanted to start living in the future. It took them a while, but they came around. My son actually came to visit me in Cuenca 6 months after I moved, and he got it. He could see the difference in me. In January 2024, I got an apartment in Gringolandia. That's what everyone calls it. It's this neighborhood that's become popular with expats. It's adjacent to the historic center, but a little quieter, with narrow streets and older buildings being renovated into modern apartments. I rented a 2-bedroom place for $900 a month. It's got exposed stone walls, high ceilings, a little kitchen, and a small terrace where I can sit in the morning and watch the city wake up. I remember the day I arrived. My landlord, this woman named Esperanza Ceballos, picked me up at the airport. She's in her 60s, speaks English well, and she had the keys ready and a little folder with all the information about the apartment. Where to pay for water, how the electricity works, which restaurants to avoid, which ones to go to. She stayed for an hour and made sure everything was perfect. Then she said, "Welcome home, Warren," and left me alone in this place I'd never been before, in a country where I barely spoke the language, at 80 years old. And I cried, just for a minute, just sat on the bed and let some tears come. Not sad tears, the other kind. The first few weeks were, honestly, disorienting. I'd made the decision, done the travel, sold the house, gotten on the plane, but actually being there, actually living it, was different. I'd wake up at 6 in the morning, which is normal for me even after all these years, and I'd lie in bed listening to the sounds of Cuenca, the bells from the churches. A man with a cart calling out in Spanish. I'd later learn he was selling bread. Someone sweeping the street outside, traffic echoing off the cobblestones. I'd get up and make coffee in this little 1-cup machine Esperanza left for me. Then I'd sit on my terrace, wrapped in a sweater because mornings are cool, and I'd watch the city come alive. The university students walking to classes, women in colorful clothing, many wearing these traditional hats. They're called sombreros de paja, which just means straw hats, but they're specific to this region. Men heading to work. The city has rhythm. It's not chaos. It's ordered. It feels cared for. The language barrier was real, but not as bad as I'd feared. I'd taken some Spanish in high school, and I'd done one of those intensive Rosetta Stone programs for 2 months before moving. It wasn't much, but it gave me the basics. I couldn't have a conversation, but I could order food, ask for directions, understand simple sentences. And the people in Cuenca, especially younger people, are patient. When I'd stumble through an order at a restaurant, they'd smile and help me out. When I'd mispronounce something, they'd gently correct me and repeat it back. Within a week, I found a routine. I'd have breakfast at the same little cafe, Cafe Cultura, which is this beautiful place in an old colonial building with a bookstore upstairs. The barista, a young woman named Diana, learned my order. Café con leche and a cheese empanada. She'd say, "Warren, usual?" And I'd nod. I felt like I was part of something small, but real. I'd walk through the market at Plaza de San Sebastian, which is this produce market in the historic center. The colors are insane. Tomatoes, peppers, corn, avocados, these little pink potatoes that are apparently native to the region. The vendors would call out to me, and some would remember me from previous visits. A woman named Marisol, who sold flowers, always tried to get me to buy these amazing orchids. "Señor Warren," she'd say, "es un regalo para una mujer, sí? A gift for a woman, yes?" And I'd laugh and say, "No, just for my apartment." She'd wink like she didn't believe me. I signed up for Spanish classes in my second week. I found a private tutor, a young woman named Carla, who was a teacher at a local school. She came to my apartment 3 times a week for 2 hours, and we just talked. She was patient and smart, and she'd correct me without making me feel stupid. We'd talk about Ecuador, the history, the culture, why things work the way they work. She told me about the indigenous peoples, the Quechua, and how their culture is still alive in the way people dress and celebrate and sell things in the market. She told me about the food, about fiestas, about how family is everything here. Within a month, I could have basic conversations, not fluently, but enough to get around, to joke with people, to ask questions. My brain felt young again. Learning something, really engaging with it, I'd forgotten how that felt. Around week 2, I met Don Joaquin. He was sitting in the Plaza Mayor one afternoon when I walked through. He was in his 70s, very distinguished looking, with gray hair and this incredible dignity. We made eye contact, and somehow we both smiled. He gestured for me to sit down. He spoke a little English, which would later prove useful, but mostly we sat in silence, watching the plaza, watching people. That became our routine. 3 times a week, I'd meet Don Joaquin at the same spot. We'd sit for an hour or 2. Sometimes we'd talk, sometimes we wouldn't. He taught me about the city where the best restaurants were, which areas were safe, how to navigate things. He had lived in Cuenca his whole life. His wife had passed away 15 years earlier. His kids had moved to Quito and Guayaquil. He had grandchildren he saw once or twice a year. He told me, in simple English, that he was happy I'd come to Cuenca. That gringos bring energy, but also sometimes loneliness. "You understand," he said. "You understand lonely." And I did. I really did. Around my 3rd month in Cuenca, I met Rosario. I was at a cafe, not my usual one, a different place I'd wanted to try on Calle Gran Colombia, which is this beautiful street with galleries and restaurants. I ordered lunch, and the woman who brought it seemed familiar somehow, though I couldn't place her. She was probably in her mid-70s, with bright gray hair pulled back, clear eyes, and this kind of warmth that was immediate and genuine. She asked if the food was good, and we started talking. Her name was Rosario Vega. She was Ecuadorian, born and raised in Cuenca. She'd been married for 47 years to a man who died 8 years ago. Her children had left Ecuador to work, one in the U.S., one in Spain. She worked part-time at the cafe because she loved it, not because she needed the money. "I need to be with people," she told me. "I need to have purpose." I came back the next day, and the next day, and on the 4th day, Rosario asked if I wanted to take a walk after her shift. We walked through the historic center, and she showed me things I hadn't noticed: the way the light hit the cathedral at sunset, a little museum in a colonial house, a church that had been decorated with huge paper flowers for a local feast day. She talked about the city like it was a person she loved. She knew the history, the stories, the significance of things. Rosario became my friend. And then, very slowly, somewhere between friend and something more, we'd have dinner together. We'd go to markets. We went to an indigenous market in Otavalo one weekend and stayed overnight in this charming little hotel. We cooked together. She taught me how to make a proper locro de papas, which is this hearty stew with meat and potatoes and cheese, and we made humitas, which are like tamales but made with fresh corn. We'd eat and drink wine and talk late into the night. About 6 months into my time in Cuenca, I had what I thought was a heart attack. It was a Saturday morning. I'd woken up with this pressure in my chest, kind of a heaviness and shortness of breath. I'd had some cardiac issues years ago, nothing major, but enough that I'd always been aware of the possibility. I called Rosario, and she came over immediately. She didn't panic, which actually calmed me down. She just said, "We go to the doctor now." We walked to a private clinic about 10 minutes away. No appointment necessary. We just walked in, and within 15 minutes I was seeing a cardiologist, a younger woman, very professional. She did an EKG on the spot. She asked questions. She palpated my chest. She looked at my blood pressure, which was elevated because I was anxious. After about 20 minutes, she told me in very clear English it was almost certainly acid reflux or anxiety-induced. The EKG looked fine. My heart sounds were good. She recommended I avoid caffeine for a few days, prescribed something for acid reflux, and said if it continued, come back. The whole visit was maybe 35 minutes. The cost was $35. Rosario paid, and I repaid her later. And I remember thinking, in the U.S., I would have gone to an emergency room, spent 4 hours waiting, had tests run that I didn't need, and gotten a bill for thousands of dollars. And I still wouldn't have felt better because I would have been terrified. Here, I felt safe. The doctor had time for me. She explained things clearly. She wasn't trying to sell me unnecessary procedures. She just helped. That moment was actually when I understood that moving here wasn't just a romantic fantasy. It was real. The health care actually worked. The health care was humane. Was it love? I don't know if that's the right word, honestly. It's been 2 years, and we're not married or living together. We're not trying to recreate what either of us had before. But it's companionship, real companionship, with physical affection and emotional intimacy and the kind of laughter that makes your stomach hurt. We understand what it is and what it isn't. And that understanding is perfect for who we are now. The physical part of life, I'll be honest, because this is real life, it's been interesting. You get to a certain age, and you think that part of yourself is done. And then someone touches your hand, and you realize it isn't. My cardiologist in Ohio would probably tell me I need to be careful. My cardiologist in Cuenca, a lovely woman named Dr. Patricia Molina, who charges $30 for an appointment, she says, as long as I take my blood pressure medication and listen to my body, I'm fine. She says the stress I was under in Ohio was worse for my heart than the joy I have now. I believe her. My daughter called me one evening, and I could tell something was on her mind. She asked how I was doing, and when I said fine, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." She asked if I was happy. Not if I was okay, not if I was managing, but if I was actually happy. And I realized that's what she'd been worried about all this time, not that I was lonely or struggling, but that I'd made this dramatic move and was just pretending it was working out. So I told her the truth. I told her about Rosario, about the market, about sitting in plazas and having time to think and read and just be without the pressure of doing something productive. I told her about the health scare and how the doctor took time to actually talk to me, not rush me. I told her that my life before, even though it looked fine on the surface, even though it had been successful by any conventional measure, felt like I was living behind glass. And here, the glass is gone. She cried a little when I told her that, not sad crying, I could tell. And she said, "Mom would be happy about this. She would be so happy about this." And that meant something. It meant that this wasn't selfish, or if it was, it wasn't wrong. My wife would have wanted this for me. She would have been mad if I'd spent the last years of my life in that house, grieving, waiting. We video chatted a few days later, and she saw my apartment. She saw the terrace. She saw a photo of me and Rosario at a cafe. And she said, "You look different, Dad. You look alive." That was a year ago, and we video chat every couple of weeks now. She's planning to visit again this summer. She wants to meet Rosario properly, to see the city through my eyes. The financial reality has been better than even my most optimistic projections. My Social Security is about $2,300 a month. My apartment costs $900. Food costs maybe $200. $300 a month if I eat out a couple of times a week and shop at markets the rest of the time. My electricity bill is $15. Internet is $25. A full medical checkup, including blood work, was $120. Dental work, I needed a filling, and it cost $40 for the visit and the procedure. I have money left over, actual money left over. I've started taking small trips. I went to the Galapagos Islands last year, just for a week, but I went. I visited other regions of Ecuador, the Amazon, the coast, the other mountain towns. I've taken Rosario with me on some of these trips, and we've explored together. My Spanish has gotten pretty good, but I still make mistakes. There was this one time, early on, when I was at the market, and I was trying to ask the fruit vendor how much the avocados cost. But I mixed up my words, and instead of asking, "Cuánto cuesta los aguacates?" I asked something that came out as, "Cuánto cuesta estar enamorado?" which translates to, "How much does it cost to be in love?" The whole market stood still for a second, and then everyone started laughing. Not mean laughing, genuine, delighted laughing. The fruit vendor, this older woman, looked at me with this huge smile and said, "Priceless, senor, priceless." And every time I've gone back to that market, people reference it. The romantic American. It's become this thing, and I love it. That kind of mistake, that kind of human moment, it would never have happened in Ohio. I would have looked up the word, made sure I had it right, been embarrassed to get it wrong publicly. Here, you say something wrong, and the world expands instead of contracts. People are amused and kind. There was a Sunday when I went to the market alone, and I bought too much food. Beautiful purple and orange produce, fresh juice, cheese, bread from the panaderia. I couldn't carry it all, and a young man, maybe 30, helped me. He walked me partway home and we talked. His name was Carlos, and he worked in construction. He was saving money to marry his girlfriend. He asked me where I was from, and when I told him I'd moved to Ecuador at 80, he looked at me with this expression of wonder. He said, "So many people talk about how they want to change their life, but they never do. They die in the same place they were born. You died in one place and were born again in another. That is the greatest adventure." I remember thinking that was exactly right. I had died in Ohio, in those years after Catherine, and I was born again here, in a place where I didn't know anyone, where I spoke the language poorly, where everything was different, and that was the greatest adventure. But honestly, most of the time, I'm just here. I'm in Cuenca. I walk, I read, I sit in cafes and watch life happen. I take Spanish classes twice a week now. I'm better at it, but I like the structure and the mental stimulation. I volunteer at an English conversation group for local people who want to improve their English. I've made friends, not close friends, but people I see and have dinner with. There's a group of expats who meet once a week at a restaurant called Trattoria Italiana, other Americans, a couple of Canadians, a Brit. We talk about how to navigate things, what we've learned, what we miss and don't miss. Last November, Rosario insisted that I experience Dia de los Difuntos, Day of the Dead, properly, not as a tourist, but as a participant. We went to the cemetery in the afternoon, and I was struck by how different it was from anything in my experience. The grave sites were elaborately decorated with marigolds and photographs and candles. Families were there with baskets of food, flowers, even drinks. It's not sad in the way American cemeteries are sad. It's a celebration. People were talking and laughing, remembering people out loud, telling stories. Rosario took me to her husband's grave. He'd been dead 8 years, and she told me stories about him. She laughed when she talked about him. She cried too, but it wasn't devastating. It was reverent and loving and normal. I realized that Ecuadorians have this relationship with death that's different. Death is part of life. The dead are still here, in memory, in the way they're spoken about. We sat there for hours, and I felt Catherine's presence too. I felt like, in a way, she was in that cemetery with me, being honored. There was a taxi driver, his name was Miguel, who I got to know because I'd take his cab home from the cafe sometimes. One night, he asked where I was from, and I told him I'd moved from Ohio. He'd heard of Ohio, but had no real sense of where it was or what it was like. So I tried to describe it to him, the winters, the Rust Belt, the way the landscape is so different from Ecuador. He asked me why I would leave a place and come here. And I told him the truth. I was lonely. And he said something I won't forget. He said, "Loneliness is different here, senor. Here, we are never alone. Always family, always people. The loneliness we have is different. It is a loneliness inside, even with many people. But your loneliness was the loneliness of absence. And you came here to find presence." I don't know if that was exactly what he meant, or if my Spanish comprehension was just filling in the gaps. But it felt true. The pace of life, the way people interact, the emphasis on family and community, all of it makes you part of something. Even as a foreigner, even as an older American man who doesn't fully speak the language, I'm included somehow. I'm not isolated in the way I was before. The rainy season here is November through May, and I experienced my first real one last year. It rains almost every afternoon, around 2 or 3 o'clock, and it's dramatic, real rain, not a drizzle, but it's warm. The smell of wet earth and vegetation fills the city. People adjust their routines around it. You go out in the morning, you're back inside by 2. After the rain, everything is fresh, and there's this incredible energy in the streets as people come back out. I'd never really paid attention to weather patterns before, but here I have. Here, the seasons matter. They shape how you move through your day. Do I miss Ohio? Not really. I miss my kids. I miss some foods. I miss speaking English without thinking about it. But those are small things. I don't miss my old life. I don't miss Catherine's ghost in every room. I don't miss the weather. Cuenca's spring-like climate all year is infinitely better than an Ohio winter. The culture has been interesting to live in rather than just observe. Ecuador has a different pace. It's not lazy. People work hard. But there's a respect for relationships and presence. If you're talking to someone at a market, they're not rushing you. If you're eating a meal, you're eating a meal. You're not gobbling it down to get to the next thing. Family is paramount. Holidays are important. There's this sense of community that I haven't experienced in America since I was a kid. Cuenca itself is changing. More expats every year, more development, more places catering to gringos. Some long-term residents worry that the authentic city is disappearing, and maybe it is, slowly. But it's still Cuenca. It's still beautiful and alive and full of people living real lives. Don Joaquin is still part of my life, even though I see him less frequently now that I have Rosario and more social obligations. But there's something about those quiet afternoons in the plaza with him that's irreplaceable. One day, maybe 6 months ago, he asked me if I regretted coming. He asked it very carefully, in simple Spanish, making sure I understood. I thought about it for a long time before answering, and I said no. I said I regret a lot of things that I didn't understand earlier, that life was something to be lived rather than endured. I regret that it took Catherine's death for me to wake up. I regret that my kids couldn't have this version of their father earlier. But I don't regret coming here. He nodded, and then he told me something about his own life. His wife had died, and for 10 years after, he'd sat in this plaza almost every day, doing nothing. His children had tried to get him to move to Quito with them, to be closer to family, but he'd refused. He'd wanted to stay in the place where they had memories together. Eventually, his children stopped trying. They visit a few times a year. They call, but they've accepted that their father belongs to this city. He said he'd wasted those 10 years, though. He'd thought he was honoring his wife by staying in grief, but he realized, near the end, that she wouldn't have wanted that. She would have wanted him to live. By the time he figured it out, he was already older, already set in his ways. And then you came, he said, an old man who understood. It gave me permission somehow to start living again, too. We're not best friends. There's still a language barrier and a cultural difference that's irreducible. But we have something. We have mutual understanding. And I think that's maybe what happens at our age. If you're lucky, you find people who get it, who understand that this stage of life isn't about settling or maintenance. It's about becoming, still becoming. I'm not going to claim that moving to Ecuador at 80 fixed everything about me. I still have days where I'm lonely. I still have aches and pains. I still think about Catherine, and sometimes those thoughts are hard. I still worry about my kids, about whether I made the right choice for them by moving so far away. I still have regrets about things I did or didn't do in my life. But the existential dread is gone. The feeling of waiting for death is gone. I'm not trying to fill time anymore. Time is full. It's used up by living. You know what I've learned in these 2 years? Everything I thought I knew about getting older was wrong. We spend our whole lives being told that the good stuff happens when you're young. Love, adventure, discovery, passion. That's all for young people. And then you get to be 50 or 60 and society kind of taps you on the shoulder and says, okay, buddy, thanks for playing. Now just maintain. Stay healthy enough. Don't be a burden. Enjoy your hobbies. Play with your grandkids. And don't make any sudden changes. That message is so insidious because it sounds reasonable. It sounds like wisdom, but it's actually a kind of death sentence. Because the implication is that your life is over, not your actual life, but your real life, your inner life, your capacity to change, to want things, to feel. I spent years, after Catherine died, accepting that part of my life was finished. The love part, the partnership part, the future part. I was supposed to be grateful for the memories and settle into this sort of grateful waiting. And I did, for a while. But something in me wouldn't accept it. Not consciously, I didn't wake up one day and decide I was going to rebel. But somewhere deep down, I was calling bullshit. Moving to Ecuador wasn't really about Ecuador. It was about saying no. No, I'm not done. I still want things. I still want to see things I haven't seen. Meet people I haven't met. Feel things I haven't felt. The hardest part, honestly, was giving myself permission to do it. It wasn't the practical stuff, selling the house, leaving my kids, learning a new language. Those were all challenging, but they were logical problems to solve. The hard part was overcoming the voice in my head that said, you're too old. You're being selfish. You should be settling in your house, being a steady presence for your kids, maybe spending more time with grandchildren. Playing it safe. Maybe I am being selfish. Maybe my kids have felt abandoned on some level, even though they don't say it. My daughter visits once a year, and we video chat every couple of weeks. My son, less often, but he comes around. My grandchildren think I'm cool because I live in South America. That's something. But I can't pretend that my choice hasn't been a choice away from something. You can't choose everything. But here's what I've realized. That guilt, that sense that I should be spending my last years as a supporting character in other people's stories, that's culturally imposed. That's not truth. That's permission I was never supposed to have asked for in the first place. My kids are adults. They have lives. They have people around them who love them. And I'm still their father, still connected to them. I just didn't sacrifice my entire self to be available for every moment of that. I've come to think that's actually healthy. I'm modeling something for them. It's not too late. You can change. You can want something different. You can have the courage to go get it. When I arrived in Ecuador, I wasn't looking for love. I was looking for life, but they turned out to be the same thing. Because love isn't just about romantic partnership, I know that now. Love is paying attention. Love is being present. Love is saying yes to people and experiences and the strange, beautiful accident of being alive. Rosario and I have something real, but it's not dependent on what happened before or what might happen next. We're not trying to resurrect the past or secure some infinite future. We're just here, together, most days. We have dinner, we talk, we hold hands. Sometimes we sit in silence, and it's enough. Sometimes we laugh at absolutely nothing, which is its own kind of grace. I think about the lesson in that. In my old life, there was always this undercurrent of anxiety. Are we secure? Are we doing enough? Are we living the right way? Are we building towards something? And when you're building, there's always this sense that the real life is coming later. When you retire, when you pay off the house, when the kids are grown. But later never really comes, does it? Later is always now, and you're too busy building to notice. Here in Cuenca, at 82, I'm finally just living. Just, being. And it turns out that's what everything was supposed to be about all along. The other thing I've learned is that happiness is not a destination. It's not even a state. It's more like a direction. It's a choice you make, over and over, usually in small ways. It's choosing to sit in a plaza even though you're 82 and your knees hurt. It's choosing to try a food you've never had before. It's choosing to say hello to Marisol at the flower stand even though you don't buy anything. It's choosing to show up to your Spanish class even though you're still terrible at verb conjugation. It's choosing to take Rosario's hand when you're walking down the street. These aren't big moments. They're tiny moments. But they accumulate. They become a life. There's a moment I have most mornings that I want to describe. I wake up around 6. I make my coffee. I sit on my terrace in a sweater because the morning is cool, even though we're at the equator. The city is starting to wake up. I hear the church bells. I hear the calls of people selling bread or vegetables. I watch the light change on the buildings across the street. They're these beautiful colonial structures, hundreds of years old, and the morning light turns them golden. And I sit there with my coffee, and I feel completely, entirely present, not thinking about whether I'm doing this right or wrong, not comparing it to anything else, just sitting, just being, just aware that I'm alive and that this moment exists and that I'm in it. That moment, that small, ordinary moment, is everything to me. It's why I came here. It's why I'm still here. I think about Catherine a lot, especially on certain holidays or certain kinds of days. Valentine's Day hit harder this year than it did last year, not because I'm lonely, but because I remember what it felt like to be young and in love and have your whole life ahead of you. And I wish she could have had this ease, this second act that I'm living. But she didn't. She got sick. That was her story, and it was a hard one, and she faced it with more courage than I ever showed. I can't change that. I can't go back and choose differently for her or for me. All I can do is honor that life we had together by actually living the life that's available to me now. Not being cautious about it, not apologizing for it, not treating it like a consolation prize, but actually, genuinely living it. That's what I think the best way to honor the dead is, not to freeze your own life in grief, but to use the time you've been given to do what they didn't get to do. Ecuador has taught me patience too. Things move slowly here. Lines are long. Bureaucracy is complicated. The internet goes out. Sometimes a plumber says he'll come Tuesday, and he comes Friday, and you just accept it. You have to. And after a while, I realize that this isn't actually a problem. What am I rushing toward? I have no job to be late to. No production quota. No promotions. What is the actual harm in waiting? This realization kind of broke my brain in a good way, because I realized how much of my old life was spent in this state of low-level urgency, always moving to the next thing, always aware of how much time I had until the next obligation. And for what? The obligations are gone now. My time is mine, and I can fill it however I want. And mostly, I want to fill it with slowness, with noticing things, with being present. There are hard days. I'm not painting some rose-tinted picture. I woke up 3 weeks ago with a pain in my chest, and I had to go to the doctor, and it turned out to be nothing serious, indigestion or anxiety or just the fact that I'm 82 and things hurt sometimes. But for a day, I was genuinely afraid. Afraid that this was it, that this dream was ending. And I realized something. I'm okay with the ending when it comes. Not eagerly waiting for it, obviously. But I'm not terrified of it anymore, because I'm not in a rush to get the important stuff done. The important stuff is what I'm doing right now. Last year, Rosario and I took a trip to Baños, which is a town a few hours away, famous for its hot springs and its waterfalls. The drive there was incredible, winding through mountains, seeing different elevations, the air getting warmer and more humid as we descended. We stayed for 3 days. We bathed in the thermal springs, which are these natural pools fed by hot water from the mountains. The water is perfectly warm, and you sit there surrounded by lush vegetation and people from the town coming to bathe before work or after. We visited a waterfall called Pilón del Diablo, Devil's Cauldron, which is this massive cascading waterfall where you can actually walk behind the water. The mist soaked us, and Rosario was laughing, and I was having this moment of absolute astonishment that my 80-year-old body could do this. We went on a zip line through the canopy. I know. I was nervous, but it was exhilarating. We ate fresh ceviche at a little restaurant overlooking the river. And one night, we sat on our hotel balcony, and Rosario told me stories about her childhood, about her husband, about dreams she'd had that didn't happen. And I told her about Catherine, about my daughter's childhood, about roads not taken. We drank wine, and it was simple, and it was everything. The point is, I'm still here. At 82, I'm still capable of adventure. My knees hurt when I walk downstairs. My back complains. But my heart works. My mind works. And I can still be surprised by the world. There's a hospice worker I met here, an American woman named Susan, who stays in Cuenca part-time and provides end-of-life care. We had coffee, and she told me that one of the most common regrets she hears from people who are dying is that they didn't live their own lives. They lived the lives they thought they were supposed to live. They spent their time trying to meet expectations, their parents' expectations, their culture's expectations, their own internalized expectations about what a responsible, proper life should look like. And in the end, when it's actually over, they realize nobody really cared that much. Their kids turned out fine. The houses got sold. The careers ended. The things they did or didn't do didn't matter nearly as much as the way they spent their days. I moved to Ecuador partly because of Catherine's death. It took me 6 years to realize that dying of cancer wasn't the real lesson of that experience. The real lesson was that I wasn't dying of anything, and I shouldn't waste that reprieve. I shouldn't spend it the way I'd been spending it, half asleep, going through the motions, waiting for my own clock to run out. When I'm gone, and I will be, sooner rather than later, statistically speaking, I want my kids to remember me as someone who actually lived, someone who took a risk at 80, someone who learned a new language, fell in love again, learned to dance to Ecuador's music, ate ceviche at street carts, and sat in plazas watching the world go by. Someone who didn't apologize for taking up space and time and trying things. Someone who said yes when they could have said no. That's the life I'm building here, one day at a time. Rosario asked me last week if I thought I'd stay in Ecuador forever, and I said, I don't know, maybe, probably not forever. I'm 82, and she laughed. But the honest answer is, it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to secure forever anymore. I'm just here, and I'm grateful for here. And when here changes, I'll deal with that when it happens. That's the deepest lesson Ecuador has taught me. The only time I actually have is now. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, not 5 years from now when I'm 87. Right now. This moment, sitting on my terrace with a cup of coffee, watching the city wake up. This moment, in a market, talking to Marisol about orchids. This moment, walking down the street with Rosario's hand in mine. This moment, having a conversation with Don Joaquin in Spanish that I actually understand. These moments are the whole thing. They're everything, and they're enough. I don't know how much time I have left. Nobody does, really. But I know I'm not going to spend it waiting. I'm not going to spend it being careful, fitting into a mold, or doing what I'm supposed to do. I moved to Ecuador to find something, a place, yes, but also a person again. Myself, maybe. The part of me that wanted things, had adventures, and could feel joy even when things were hard. And I found it. I found it here, in the Highlands, in a place that's not supposed to be where an 82-year-old American man from Ohio finds his second life. But life doesn't really care about what's supposed to happen. Life just happens. And if you're paying attention, if you say yes instead of no, if you choose to live instead of wait, sometimes it turns out to be extraordinary.